Hey, how's it going? It's your boy, Challenger Coach Adam Mobalytics here to bring you the 10.5 low-elo tier list, so let's jump right into it. In the top lane, our starting S tier roster will be Garen, Darius, Shen, and Fiora. For our changes, we have Ornn down from S tier to A tier due to his nerfs, Jax and Renekton from B tier to A tier due to itemization buffs like Hydra items or giving them both a Bork option as well, along with being really big benefactors of the turret play changes. Urgot will be moving from A tier to B tier this patch as he gets hit by another indirect nerf for being a semi-rage champion, hurting his ability to bully lane and take plates, while also we shout around Poppy for a bit in top lane, as in low elo she really doesn't do that well. She's still a viable counter pick into Riven mains if you want to make them hate themselves a little bit though. Let's talk about some important changes with Fiora, everyone's favorite French Grand Duelist in League of Legends, moving from A tier to S tier. Fiora was already gaining a lot of priority in top lane due to her anti-tank nature in a melee heavy patch, but she got even more buffs on this patch, including one to her core item Ravenous Hydra, which she actually goes first or second item now. Not only that though, but turret plate gold increase is huge for her when you combine it with the fact that her Q's hitting towers, her E's critting towers if she ever gets a lead in the lane, which, you know, it's Fiora, it'll probably happen, especially if she's laning versus a tank. She will just destroy those turret plates and get the improved Hydra so quickly that you won't be able to stop her snowball after that. I'm also going to give you a little bit of insider information on Fiora, as she will likely be moving up on the High-ELO tier list as well to S tier, so that's going to make her S tier on both lists, so it's making it so that she's an incredibly good champion to main in terms of time investment, and you will be rewarded for playing her in 10.5. Our next important change will be moving my favorite top laner, Shen, from A tier to S tier. Now, at this point in time, you might be thinking to yourself, but it's Shen. I know he's a solid top laner, but is he really S tier material in this lane dominant solo queue meta? Damn right he is. With the most in-your-face ninja style you've ever seen, he's gonna net that 54% win rate on patch 10.5, all due to his core items, Titanic Hydra and Sunfire Cape getting some massive damage buffs. This means with Shen's already pretty strong laning phase, it'll become even stronger in the 1v1 and split push game, allowing him to output more map pressure, farm better, not to mention he's only got two hard losing matchups in the low-elo bracket, which include Mordekaiser and Garen, which are common bans anyways. I can vouch from personal experience, it is a good time to be a Shen player right now, as you're one of the few tanks who can actually deal a bunch of damage and just 1v1 and pretty much kill people in one taunt if they're an AD carry. And as always, you got that sick ultimate to help your bot lane feed a little bit less, so he is a definite pickup for this patch. That means our last top lane change will be to Da Bear, moving him from B tier to A tier. Volibear top lane has been seen as a little bit of a gimmick during recent seasons. Despite its high win rate, no one really paid attention to him as a staple top laner. But don't worry, Volibear, before your rework, I still see you for who you really are as a champion. You're a champion with amazing dueling power, 1v2 potential thanks to your AoE damage, execute, absurd healing, and dash interrupt from your E. Sure, he might not be as super impactful in teamfights compared to other melee champions in the late game, but with constant buffs to his core items like Sunfire Cape or Titanic Hydra, then you really should be snowballing but way before that point and close the game out, or at minimum make the enemy top laner as useless as you are. But then again, at least Volibear's got tanky in the late game and he's got decent peeling abilities. That means if you like picking up and coming fighter champions, I would hop on the Volibear train ASAP. In the mighty jungle, we have our starting S tier roster of Master Yi, Trundle, Amumu, Zac, Warwick, and Echo. For changes, we've got Jax moving from B tier to A tier thanks to some item buffs. Sylas is going to slot into B tier as a no-skill bruiser. Sylas jungle build has come up where you just go Runic Echoes, Iceborne Gauntlet, and Spirit Visage is now pretty popular. We got Set moving down from S tier to A tier due to his nerfs hurting his early game. Then we got Shaco moving down from S tier to A tier as he really isn't doing very well versus all the tanks and tanky champions that are popular at the moment. Well, we also removed Rek'Sai from the low-elo list as she is doing terrible versus the late game scaling jungle meta and peel supports. Next up, we got the edgiest jungle champion Kayn moving from B tier to A tier for now, as he has got some decent buffs coming in for his transformation speed as well as the increased slow on his W, making it easier for him to do literally anything in the early game at all. This is supposed to be a meta where Red Kayn should be excelling, so any help to pre-transformation Kayn is welcome, as he's just awful early game at the moment, so the slow increase should help his ganking power, or ability to clean up a kill should be a little bit easier, allowing him to scale faster towards his transformation. But once you do get that red form, oh baby does it feel good right now. It's just mostly about finding ways to not lose the game pre-10 minutes, which is, you know, still a bit of an issue for Kayn. Regardless, he is going to do better on this patch, and he'll likely land in low A tier or at the very least high B tier. That means our last change to the list is one I'm personally interested in, and that's adding Poppy to B tier jungle. She's been a niche jungle pick for a couple of years now, and I've always felt she might be a bit more healthy of a champion from the jungle rather than in top lane. I can already see every single top laner just nodding their head in approval like, yeah, this Mobalytics guy, he's spot on. Get Poppy out of top lane and into the jungle. Anyway, without pandering to that lane a little bit too much because this is the jungle section, we got buffs to Cinderhawk, which are helpful for Poppy jungle. We got buffs to her clear speed on her Q, which of course are going to be helpful, and so she should be a pretty decent jungler on this patch, and she's going to be able to completely deny champions like Lee Sin or Rengar from existing on the Rift. Now, I am aware that she can go an assassin or bruiser style from the jungle with things like warriors, electrocute, trinity force, but this is 10.5 and it's a tank meta, so I'm gonna recommend her tank setup as her standard instead. You're gonna want to go blue smite Cinderhulk Deadman's plate with aftershock primary and domination secondary for that relentless hunter and sudden impact for the map movement and the dueling power, which is actually surprisingly good because you can't really dodge the wall stun from Poppy when fighting her in the river or the jungle. That means our last highlight of the jungle this time around will be Trundle. Yes, I know, he's been talked about a lot recently, and you're tired of hearing that it's a melee heavy meta with lots of tanks, and so of course Trundle is doing well. But it's really not my fault because Trundle just keeps getting buffed. He's gotten direct buffs to his pillar, to his W, he's gotten indirect buffs from the meta shifting into his favor from all the tanks, he's gotten buffs to the jungle item with Cinderhawk, and you know, he can actually proc it with his pillar by the way, and now he's gotten another set of buffs to his core item Titanic Hydra, giving him way more damage and carry potential than before. Especially in low elo, if you're snowballing, you could probably even substitute in a Bork or a Ravenous Hydra, and you know, it's just giving him more itemization options. And after so many years of being called useless and being underrated, saying, you know, he's just a role champion, he's only good in certain metas, he's finally getting his time to shine, kind of like my boy POB. Moving down to the mid lane, our starting S tier roster will be Diana, Fizz, Kassadin, Echo, and Katarina. As for changes to the list, we got quite a few this time around, which include moving Lux and Zilean from B tier to A tier as they are both safe versus assassins and good at buffing up tanks. We got Garen moving right into A tier as an incredible anti-assassin pick with a 55% win rate, just smashing Zed and Fizz players left and right. Is actually really good, trust me on this one. We then added in Pantheon to B tier as another anti-assassin champion, Lissandra due to her buffs and being an anti-assassin champion, Nico due to her buffs and being anti-assassin champion. I hope you're noticing some kind of trend here as we keep going. And then we also swapped out Xerath for Zoe in B tier as she is the more viable artillery mage, and even as you keep going up and up the ladder, she starts to do way better, so it's much better to have Zoe there. Then we got Silas moving down from A tier to B tier, and then we Shadow Realm Set due to his nurse. My brother in arms Twisted Fate though got Shadow Realmed in low elo due to his low DPS versus frontline comps and then low win rate, though you will likely see him make a comeback once his buffs come in, but you know, until then, Shadow Realm for sure. For some more important changes though, we got Cass and Win moving from A tier to S tier this patch. One of the nice things about playing Kassadin at the moment is he pretty much hard counters all of the other S tier champions, and he's got decent matchups into other popular mid lane matchups in the meta, like versus Yasuo, as long as he max E, into LeBlanc, into Silas, into Lux. These champions all do bad versus him. So not only did he get an increase in strong matchups, but you know, my go-to counter pick is getting another nice little bonus with the turret plane changes. These changes are super nice for Kassadin as he gets pushed in easily by ranged champions and won't lose plates as quickly, and he's really good at taking turret plates thanks to his W. When you combine this change with good matchups and more tanks in the meta slowing the pace of the game down while also not being able to match Kassadin in the split push at all, Kassadin will be consistently able to make it to level 16, and as long as your Nexus didn't explode by then, you will truly not lose another game. We also got Vlad moving from B tier to A tier as a safe option in the mid lane. Kinda similar to Kassadin, Vlad thrives in a meta that's got tanks in them as games tend to last longer, allowing him more time to scale, while also having more targets that can't even begin to think about killing him. Not even if he breaks his keyboard while mashing his combos, I mean, you know, mashing his Q key. Even then, I'm not really sure a Maokai could probably kill Vladimir who's just clicking on Q over and over again. But you know, outside of all that stuff and the game pace changes helping him out, he's also safe versus the large amount of assassin picks in the mid lane at the moment, and he's even able to bully some of the melee ones, giving him a lot of priority in lane, which isn't normal for him in control mage heavy metas. That means if you're a Vladimir enthusiast or abuser, you should look to pick him back up again as it's moving towards his ideal meta faster and faster, at least in the mid lane. Next up, we got Nocturne moving from B tier to A tier, and you know, I feel like I say this a lot lately, but he is a great anti-assassin pick, but very similar to Diana in the sense that he is an assassin himself. Nocturne mid has been gaining more popularity as of late over in China and Korea thanks to his amazing 1v1 and lane priority versus other melee champions, while still having really good kill pressure versus control mages thanks to his ultimate. The big thing though that's making him strong right now was that the change to stopwatch and perfect timing was huge for him, as they both counter him really hard during the early and mid game. Not only that, but on this patch, both Nocturne and Diana got some massive buffs from the turret plant changes, as they both take them incredibly quickly because Nocturne's got that high attack speed and the Q bonus AD, which is so good for taking towers. Then of course Diana's Diana. This means that Nocturne is able to snowball faster and easier than before, which is super helpful because, you know, he can't really teamfight at all or do anything in the late game, so he definitely needs to do that. For the ball-in S tier roster, we have Jinx, Misfortune, Senna, Jhin, Caitlyn, and Vayne. Rankings change wise, we have Yasuo from B tier to A tier due to getting some of his old lane partners back like Alistar, along with adding in Ziggs to B tier for the buy lane list as a surprisingly strong mage option that you'll probably see a little bit more of. While we also move Kog'Maw down from A tier to B tier. In terms of strengths, he is pretty good at the moment, but he is way too reliant on which champion his support picks, and you never want to rely on that in solo queue. We got Aphelios, everyone's favorite ADC to see get nerfed, is moving up from B tier to A tier this patch due to his new setup. Aphelios has some pretty amazing synergy with Press the Attack, which is why it's his most used setup on release, but more recently, pros have been swapping to Conqueror along with going Essence Reaver into IE over Essence Reaver into a Zeal item. This is due to Aphelios being able to stack Conqueror super quickly, especially with the pistol Q. When you combine that with higher AD from the IE second, his mid game becomes much more explosive, giving him even better dueling power, able to match up and even beat assassin picks in the upfront damage and healing department. Which is really awesome for Aphelios players because they have to pay even less attention to his positioning and, you know, what guns he uses, because it doesn't really matter what guns he's using or where he's positioned, because with those two items in the Conqueror, he's gonna outduel pretty much any champion at the moment. I'm sure this is making Dravenmins cry in a corner right now because they've got to use a bunch of APM to jungle axes, and then they got to try and kite an Ornn, dodging every single skill shot, catching that axes, and then they just got auto attacked to death, and then they noticed that Ornn's only at 40% HP after 40 autos. This is the champion Draven wishes he could be, but he wasn't designed in Season 10. Next up, we got one of my favorite ADCs to play back when he went full lethality Legolas style in the mid lane, and that's Varus. You've likely seen him in competitive play over the last couple of months, being picked for his solid laning and high DPS versus melee heavy comps, and in competitive play, you got a lot of tanks recently. Well, that means that now that the solo queue meta has caught up to the competitive one a little bit, the utility that Varus brings in terms of the CC, the healing reduction, and the absurd teamfight DPS are finally usable in a teamfight heavy solo queue meta. That means that as long as you have at least one frontline champion, Varus is going to be a really solid pickup, and he's even got a little bit of versatility with his build. You can do his standard tank shredder route, or you can go his lethality route versus squishier comps, which Korea currently likes to do. If you don't know his lethality item build, well, just build a bunch of lethality items and then LW and you'll be just fine. With that being said, our last highlighted champion for the ball-in will be that Ashe. Similar to why Varus is doing better on this patch, Ashe is also doing a lot better due to the increase in frontline heavy comps, even closing in on that S tier pretty soon thanks to her strong teamfight ability in a 5v5 setting. Don't get me wrong, just like in the past, she will still struggle versus assassin heavy comps, but there's a lot more anti-assassin picks in the meta, and unlike other AD carries, since she runs lethal tempo, she can get away with going an early PD or Tobbies and not have her DPS hurt too much. Also, just to be a little frank here, she is just super easy and always useful because of her utilities and slows, plus her ultimate making her a very consistent choice at lower levels of play. Like, even if you're feeding on Ashe, the least you can provide some CC or engage for your team, unlike if you're feeding on Vayne when you're really only providing warmth from your team from all the flame you're likely sending their way. And lastly, our S tier roster for the support role will be Janna, Blitzcrank, Nami, Taric, and Senna. For our changes to the list, we have Sona moving from B tier to A tier thanks to her buffs, as movement speed buffs are always super helpful for Sona. We got Maokai support coming in hot as a bit of a sleeper pick to A tier. We'll have to watch him a little bit more as the patch progresses, but we'll talk about him a little bit more during the pick of the patch video, so stay tuned for that. We also got Karma going to B tier as the nerfs to mobility boost will help all Enchantress supports who barely have to leave lane. Speaking of champions that like to leave lane, we got Alistar returning to B tier after a really long break thanks to the buffs helping out his early game. For our first highlighted champion, despite the meta moving more towards enchanters and less about the engaged supports, they still have really high play rates like Leona, Thresh, Nautilus, Pyke, meaning Shaco support can still thrive for a bit longer, so we moved him to A tier for now. Shaco support is one of those weird meta picks that popped off at the beginning of the season as a strong counter to the support meta of pretty much just Leona versus Nautilus every single game. Despite those two champions receiving both direct nerfs to their damage and now more nerfs to their roaming power, the mobility boots getting a cost increase, in solo queue the trend of enchanters getting stronger while pick supports are getting weaker hasn't fully caught on yet. Like I mentioned before, this can be shown by the massive play rates champions like Nautilus and Leona still hold, allowing champions like Taric and Shaco to thrive, and it's super easy for them to dominate the laning phase now as mobility boots won't kick in as early, which is a nice buff for someone who just wants to stay in lane and land a bunch of trap cards everywhere. Next up, our other highlight is going to be Blitzcrank, who received a direct nerf to his armor this patch along with nerfs to mobility boots, which are pretty key on him early on. Despite those changes, Blitzcrank really won't fall out of S tier even if his early game gets a little bit weaker. The reason for this is pretty simple. His matchups into popular meta picks, especially enchanters, are still so strong that they can just carry him into S tier despite the loss of a bit of power. He's still going to smash champions like Thresh, Janna, Pyke, Nami, Lulu, Karma, Sona, and so on and so forth. And now with Yuumi back being meta with over a 10% play rate, he's got his easiest matchup in the world back on the table. It just feels so good to grab an AD carry player who can't dodge and get 2 kills for it. All in all, it's going to take a little bit more than just a little bit less armor and a price increase on his Nikes to keep the robot from grabbing some LP, so definitely keep playing him. Our last champion to highlight this patch will be Lux support. Yeah, I know, it's a little weird and personally I'm not a big fan of her, but she unfortunately does have some undeniable stats where she is greatly overperforming in silver and below, where she is one of the most popular champions in that bracket on top of that. Now she does start to do worse the higher up you go on the ladder, but with the AP setup over the utility one, she can carry pretty well in low elo. Just do me this one favor and buy the support item. I have seen way too many Lux support players start Doran's Ring, and I think Riot should consider making it reportable, or at the very least, if you are playing Lux support, it should be disabled for you to buy anything other than a support item. Please and thank you. This means that if you are trying to hit gold, Lux can be a pretty good option for you. If you're decent with your skill shots, you'll note that the build in this section will have Zhonya's as a core item, and this is just because mage supports tend to get focused down and die a lot, so it's going to help you survive as no one's going to peel for a Lux support, I can guarantee you that. But if you are snowballing or the enemy team doesn't have any divers, then you still can grab a Death Cap or an Oblivion Orb over that Zhonya's instead. That's it, folks. Thanks for watching our 10.5 low elo tier list, but be sure to check out our other content on this channel or at mobalytics.gg. As always, I'm the Napoleon of League of Legends, Adam Moriarty Isles, and may the old and new solo queue gods be with you.